Welcome back to American Vehicles, folks. Today we're stepping inside Jay Leno's garage and taking a closer look at one of the most fascinating parts of his collection, his 1960s cars. Over the next few minutes, we'll uncover all 36 machines, beginning with the early 60s and working our way towards some of the rarest and most unforgettable cars of 1969. And this isn't just a lineup of old classics sitting in a garage. These are the machines that helped define an era, from American muscle cars and British roadsters to Italian exotics, rotary-powered experiments, and even turbine-powered technology. These cars tell the story of a decade when manufacturers took risks and engineers occasionally ignored common sense entirely. Today we're exploring Jay Leno's incredible collection of the 1960s cars, one machine at a time. Let's get started. Car number 1, the 1960 Triumph TR3. The 1960 Triumph TR3, built by British manufacturer Triumph, looks like the kind of car that politely asks if you'd like a Sunday drive through the countryside. Then it reminds you that British sports cars from the 1960s occasionally had a complicated relationship with reliability. The TR3, produced from 1955 to 1962, was one of Triumph's most successful early sports cars, and became famous for bringing affordable performance to both Europe and America. Under the hood sat a 2.0-liter inline-4 engine, and while the horsepower numbers weren't earth-shattering, the car weighed so little that it felt surprisingly lively. One interesting feature was its cutaway doors, which made getting in and out easier and gave the car a unique appearance. Today it feels charming, simple, and unmistakably British, which usually means equal parts character and unpredictability. Car number 2, the 1961 Chrysler 300G. The 1961 Chrysler 300G, built by Chrysler, wasn't a sports car pretending to be fast. It was a full-size luxury missile from an era when Detroit believed performance and size could peacefully coexist. Part of Chrysler's famous Letter series, the 300G arrived in 1961 and came powered by a monstrous 413 cubic inch V8, producing up to 375 horsepower. Back then, those numbers weren't just impressive, they were the automotive equivalent of showing up to a neighborhood baseball game with a flamethrower. The 300G also introduced distinctive canted headlights, giving the car a futuristic look that stood out even in the chrome-heavy early 1960s. Despite weighing well over 2 tons, it could still approach 140 miles per hour, which must have felt slightly terrifying with 1960s brakes and suspension technology. Jay Leno owning one makes perfect sense. It's elegant, rare, powerful, and just a little bit ridiculous in all the right ways. Car number 3. The 1961 Chevrolet Corvair Rampside. The 1961 Chevrolet Corvair Rampside, built by Chevrolet, answers a question nobody had really asked. What if a pickup truck had a side door and its engine lived in the back? Introduced in 1961, the Rampside was part of Chevrolet's wildly unconventional Corvair 95 series and used a rear-mounted, air-cooled flat-six engine. That alone made it different from almost every American truck on the road. Its most famous feature was the large side-loading ramp, which folded down to make hauling motorcycles, tools, and cargo dramatically easier. It was practical, clever, and slightly strange, which honestly describes a lot of the most interesting vehicles ever built. The Corvair itself later became controversial over safety debates, but the Rampside earned loyal fans. Jay Leno owning one makes sense because this truck feels like an engineer got bored one afternoon and decided normal ideas were overrated. Car number 4, the 1962 Maserati 3500 GTI. The 1962 Maserati 3500 GTI, built by Maserati, came from a time when Italian Grand Touring cars believed speed and elegance could arrive together, preferably while wearing a tailored suit. Introduced in the late 1950s and continuing into 1962, the 3500 GTI represented Maserati's move from building mostly race cars into creating refined road cars. The GTI stood for Gran Turismo in Azione, meaning it used fuel injection, a big technological upgrade at the time and a first for Maserati production cars. Under the hood sat a 3.5-liter inline-6, derived from Maserati racing engines, producing around 235 horsepower. That made the car both fast and comfortable, which was a rare combination in the early 1960s. Jay Leno owning one makes perfect sense. It's beautiful, sophisticated, and unmistakably Italian, which usually means breathtaking style and occasional emotional negotiations with mechanics. Car number 5, the 1962 Daimler SP250. The 1962 Daimler SP250, built by British manufacturer Daimler, Looked like someone asked a designer to combine elegance, performance, and absolute unpredictability into one sports car. Introduced in 1959 and still rolling into 1962, the SP250 stood out because of its unusual styling and something even more surprising under the hood, a 2.5-liter Hemi V8 engine. That's right, a small British roadster with a V8, because apparently someone at Daimler thought subtlety was overrated. The SP250 was also one of the first British sports cars to use a fiberglass body, helping keep weight down and performance lively. It could reach over 120 miles per hour, which felt very fast in the early 1960s, and probably required a healthy amount of bravery. Jay Leno owning one makes perfect sense. It's quirky, rare, and slightly odd, which in Jay's garage is practically a requirement. Car number 6, the 1963 Porsche 356 Carrera II. The 1963 Porsche 356 Carrera II, built by Porsche, came from a period when the company was still building its identity and quietly creating the blueprint for decades of sports cars to come. Introduced near the end of the 356's production run, the Carrera II represented one of the most advanced and powerful versions Porsche had built at the time. Under the rear deck sat a 2.0-liter flat-4 Carrera engine, producing around 130 horsepower. That may not sound enormous today, but in a lightweight sports car from 1963, it delivered serious performance. The name Carrera itself came from the legendary Carrera Panamericana road race, connecting the car directly to Porsche's motorsport ambitions. Today, the Carrera II feels like a glimpse into Porsche history before the 911 arrived and changed everything. Because sometimes legends begin long before people realize they're watching one. Car number 7, the 1963 Jaguar XKE short wheelbase. The 1963 Jaguar XKE short wheelbase, built by Jaguar, arrived during a period when the British manufacturer created a car so beautiful that people still talk about it as if it were a work of art that accidentally became transportation. Known in Europe as the E-Type, the early 1963 models featured a desirable short wheelbase design, giving the car cleaner proportions and a more athletic appearance. Under the long hood sat Jaguar's famous 3.8-liter inline-six, producing around 265 horsepower, serious performance for the early 1960s. When the E-Type debuted in 1961, it shocked the automotive world with its combination of speed, styling, and price. It could reach nearly 150 miles per hour, which at the time placed it in territory usually reserved for exotic machines costing far more. Car number 8, the 1963 Jaguar E-Type. The 1963 Jaguar E-Type, built by Jaguar, wasn't simply introduced to the world, it practically made an entrance. When it debuted in the early 1960s, it immediately became one of the most talked about sports cars on the planet. Under its famously long hood sat a 3.8-liter inline-six engine, producing around 265 horsepower, helping the E-Type reach nearly 150 miles per hour. In 1963, that kind of speed wasn't just impressive, it was the sort of number that made competitors nervously adjust their neckties. The E-Type combined exotic car performance with a price tag far lower than many Italian rivals, which helped make it an instant success. Even Enzo Ferrari reportedly called it the most beautiful car ever made. And when the founder of Ferrari compliments your car, you frame that quote and probably never stop mentioning it. Car number 9. The 1963 Ford Falcon Sprint. The 1963 Ford Falcon Sprint, built by Ford, was proof that sometimes the recipe for performance doesn't need to be complicated. Take a small car, give it a bigger engine, and suddenly ordinary transportation starts making much more interesting noises. Introduced in 1963, the Falcon Sprint became one of the earliest examples of Ford experimenting with compact performance cars. Under the hood sat a 260 cubic inch V8, producing around 164 horsepower. That may not sound huge today, but in a lightweight compact car of the early 1960s, it gave the Falcon a completely different personality. Many automotive historians consider cars like the Falcon Sprint important because they helped pave the way for something that would arrive only a year later: the Ford Mustang. Because sometimes the cars that change history aren't the famous stars. They're the opening act before the main event arrives. Car number 10. The 1963 Chrysler Turbine. The 1963 Chrysler Turbine, built by Chrysler, looked like a car from the future because in many ways that's exactly what it was supposed to be. Introduced in 1963, the Chrysler Turbine car became one of the most ambitious automotive experiments ever attempted. Instead of using a traditional piston engine, it featured a gas turbine engine, technology inspired by jet aircraft. Even more unusual, the turbine could run on an incredible range of fuels, including diesel, kerosene, jet fuel, and even tequila. Yes, tequila. Although filling your tank after a party was probably not Chrysler's official recommendation. Only 55 examples were built, with most sent to real American families for testing. Unfortunately, the technology proved expensive and difficult to produce on a large scale. Car number 11. The 1963 Chevrolet Corvette split-window coupe Fueli. The 1963 Chevrolet Corvette split-window coupe Fueli, built by Chevrolet, is one of those rare cars that enthusiasts can identify from a mile away, and sometimes before they even finish saying the name. Introduced in 1963, this Corvette belonged to the new C2 generation, also known as Stingray, and featured one of the most recognizable designs in American automotive history, the famous split rear window. That design only lasted for a single model year, instantly making it legendary. The term Fueli referred to Chevrolet's optional fuel-injected 327 cubic inch V8, producing up to 360 horsepower. In the early 1960s, it was serious performance and enough power to make tire life expectancy a very short conversation. Today, the split-window Corvette is one of the most collectible American cars ever built. Car number 12. The 1964 Honda S600. The 1964 Honda S600, built by Honda, arrived at a time when most people knew Honda for motorcycles, not sports cars. But this little machine quietly announced the company had much bigger ambitions. Introduced in 1964, the S600 became one of Honda's earliest production sports cars and featured a tiny 606cc inline four-cylinder engine, producing around 57 horsepower. Now, that number may not sound earth-shattering today, but there was a catch. This tiny engine happily revved past 9,000 RPM. 9,000. In the mid-1960s, that was the automotive equivalent of drinking espresso and immediately deciding to run a marathon. The S600 also used a unique chain-driven rear-wheel setup, inspired by motorcycle engineering. And honestly, finding a quirky little engineering experiment like this in Jay Leno's garage feels exactly right. Car number 13. The 1965 Jensen CV8 Mark II. The 1965 Jensen CV8 Mark II, built by British manufacturer Jensen Motors, looked like a refined grand touring car on the outside, but underneath it carried something much more American, a giant Chrysler V8. Introduced during the early 1960s, the CV8 Mark II combined British styling with raw American horsepower, creating one of the most unusual performance cars of its era. Under the hood sat a powerful 6.3-liter Chrysler V8, giving the car performance numbers that could embarrass many dedicated sports cars of the day. The styling was distinctive too, especially the unusual rear glass design that looked futuristic even by mid-1960s standards. Despite being quick and luxurious, only a relatively small number were built, making it a rare sight today. Car number 14. The 1965 Ford Mustang Shelby GT350. The 1965 Ford Mustang Shelby GT350, built by Ford and transformed by Carroll Shelby, wasn't created to be a comfortable cruiser. It was built with one goal in mind: make the brand new Mustang much faster and much more serious. Introduced in 1965, the GT350 took the already successful Mustang and turned it into a proper performance machine. Under the hood sat a 289 cubic inch V8, producing around 306 horsepower, a huge number for a relatively lightweight car of the era. Shelby removed unnecessary weight, upgraded the suspension, improved handling, and gave the Mustang real racing credentials. This wasn't just a sporty trim package, it was a car built to compete. And honestly, seeing a car like this inside Jay Leno's collection feels inevitable. Car number 15. The 1966 Volvo 122S. The 1966 Volvo 122S, built by Volvo, came from an era when Swedish car makers seemed to have one mission: build something so durable that future generations would accidentally inherit it. Part of the famous Volvo Amazon series, the 122S arrived with a 1.8-liter inline four-cylinder engine, producing around 95 horsepower. That may not sound like headline material, but the Volvo earned its reputation through reliability, simplicity, and a toughness rather than outright speed. The S stood for sport, and compared to standard versions, it offered more performance than sharper driving characteristics. The car also gained popularity in rally racing, proving it could handle far more than daily commuting duties. A Volvo from the 1960s may not sound exciting at first, until you realize many of them seem mechanically determined to outlive everyone involved. Car number 16. The 1966 Volga GAZ-21. The 1966 Volga GAZ-21, built by Soviet manufacturer GAZ, came from a completely different automotive world. While America spent the 1960s chasing horsepower and chrome, the Soviet Union had a very different idea of what a car should be. Introduced in the 1950s, and continuing until the 1960s, the GAZ-21 Volga became one of the most important cars in the Soviet Union. Powered by a 2.4-liter inline four-cylinder engine, it focused less on speed and more on durability and practicality. Its styling was interesting too, borrowing inspiration from American designs of the era. Looking at one feels a bit like Detroit and Moscow accidentally attended the same design meeting. Cars like the Volga were often reserved for government officials, professionals, and state use, making them symbols of status inside the Soviet Union. And honestly, a Soviet sedan sitting inside Jay Leno's garage feels exactly like the kind of unexpected plot twist his collection specializes in. Car number 17. The 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado. The 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado, built by Oldsmobile, looked like a futuristic luxury coupe, but hidden underneath was one of the boldest engineering decisions made by an American automaker during the 1960s. Introduced in 1966, the Toronado became one of the first successful American cars to use front-wheel drive since the 1930s. That alone made it unusual, but Oldsmobile didn't stop there. Under the hood sat a massive 425 cubic inch Super Rocket V8, producing around 385 horsepower. So yes, someone looked at a giant V8 powered luxury coupe and thought, you know what this needs? Front-wheel drive. Surprisingly, it worked. The Toronado combined advanced engineering, futuristic styling, and serious performance into one package. Looking at it today, it feels like a car from an alternate timeline, where engineers simply decided to see what would happen. Car number 18. The 1966 NSU Spider. The 1966 NSU Spider, built by German manufacturer NSU, may look like a small and charming convertible, but underneath it carried one of the most unusual engineering experiments of the entire decade. Introduced in 1964 and still in production by 1966, the NSU Spider became the world's first production car powered by a Wankel rotary engine. Instead of traditional pistons moving up and down, the engine used a spinning triangular rotor. It was compact, smooth, futuristic, and at the time, it looked like the future of the automobile. The little single-rotor engine produced around 50 horsepower, which wasn't exactly enough to rearrange your internal organs, but performance was never really the point. The Spider was more about innovation than speed. And honestly, a tiny German roadster powered by experimental engineering sounds exactly like the kind of thing Jay Leno would spot and immediately say, yep, I need that. Car number 19. The 1966 Lotus Elan 26R. The 1966 Lotus Elan 26R, built by British manufacturer Lotus, was proof that adding more horsepower isn't always the answer. Sometimes the answer is simply making everything lighter and letting physics do the heavy lifting. Introduced as the racing version of the standard Lotus Elan, the 26R arrived in the mid-1960s with a lightweight body, race-focused suspension, and a tuned 1.6-liter twin-cam inline-4 engine, producing up to 140 horsepower depending on the specification. Now, by American standards, 140 horsepower might sound modest, but the Elan weighed so little that it made larger cars feel like they were towing small buildings behind them. Lotus founder Colin Chapman famously believed in the idea, simplify, then add lightness. And the 26R followed that philosophy perfectly, because sometimes the fastest way forward isn't adding more power, it's carrying less baggage. Car number 20. The 1966 Lincoln Continental. The 1966 Lincoln Continental, built by Lincoln, didn't arrive with subtlety in mind. This was luxury on a very American scale. Long, elegant, and large enough to make some modern parking spaces feel slightly nervous. By 1966, the Continental had already become one of the most recognizable luxury cars in America. Under the hood sat a massive 462 cubic inch V8, producing around 340 horsepower and delivering the kind of smooth power expected from a premium flagship car. Of course, the feature most people remember is the famous rear-hinged suicide doors. They gave the Continental a dramatic appearance and instantly became one of its defining characteristics. The car also gained a place in American history, although for far more serious reasons, through its connection to presidential limousines of the era. Today, the Continental feels like a reminder of a time when luxury cars weren't built to feel sporty, they were built to feel important. Car number 21. The 1966 Ford Shelby AC Cobra 427. The 1966 Ford Shelby AC Cobra 427, built through a partnership between AC Cars, Ford, and Carroll Shelby, was less of a sports car and more of a rolling declaration of bad intentions. By 1966, the legendary 427 Cobra had become one of the most extreme performance machines on the road. Shelby took the lightweight British AC Roadster and installed Ford's massive 427 cubic inch V8, producing well over 400 horsepower depending on configuration. Now imagine putting that amount of power into a car weighing barely over 2,300 pounds. That combination created a machine capable of 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 4 seconds, which in the mid-1960s felt less like driving and more like accidentally launching something. Even today, the Cobra has a reputation for demanding respect, because when horsepower dramatically outweighs common sense, things tend to get very interesting very quickly. Car number 22. The 1966 Ford Galaxy 500 7-liter. The 1966 Ford Galaxy 500 7-liter, built by Ford, came from an era when American car companies believed engine size should be measured in numbers large enough to sound slightly unreasonable. Introduced in 1966, the 7-liter package was Ford's way of making sure customers immediately understood what this car was about. Under the hood sat a massive 428 cubic inch V8, producing around 345 horsepower and delivering the kind of torque that made traffic lights feel more like starting lines. And yes, Ford literally named the car after the engine size. No mysterious trim names, no marketing puzzles, just 7 liters of V8. Despite its size, the Galaxy delivered serious performance and reflected Detroit's horsepower battles during the 1960s, when bigger often meant better. Car number 23. The 1966 Dodge Coronet. The 1966 Dodge Coronet, built by Dodge, arrived during a time when Detroit was fully committed to one simple philosophy. If a car looked aggressive and had a large V8 under the hood, somebody was going to want one. By 1966, the Coronet had evolved into a mid-size platform that could be ordered in everything from practical family car to full-blown muscle car territory. Depending on the version, buyers could choose engines ranging from modest 6 cylinders all the way up to massive 426 Hemi V8 power. That flexibility made the Coronet something of an automotive shapeshifter. One owner used it for school pickups and grocery runs. Another owner might have used it to introduce nearby tires to a very difficult day. The Coronet later became an important foundation for Dodge's muscle car era. Because sometimes legends don't begin as stars. They begin as platforms waiting for someone. Car number 24. The 1966 Chevrolet Stage 2 Corvair Yenko Stinger. The 1966 Chevrolet Stage 2 Corvair Yenko Stinger, built by Chevrolet and modified by legendary performance dealer Don Yenko, was what happened when someone looked at the already unusual Corvair and decided it simply wasn't strange enough. Introduced in 1966, the Yenko Stinger transformed Chevrolet's rear-engine Corvair Corsa into a lightweight performance machine aimed at racing. The Stage 2 package upgraded the car's air-cooled flat-six engine, pushing output to around 190 horsepower, depending on setup. Now, a rear-engine American performance car already sounds unusual. A rear-engine American performance car built for racing? That sounds like someone in Detroit accidentally wandered into a European engineering meeting. Only a small number of Yenko Stingers were built, making them highly collectible today. Because sometimes the most interesting cars are the ones brave enough to ignore the normal blueprint entirely. Car number 25. The 1966 Chevrolet Corsair Corsa. The 1966 Chevrolet Corsair Corsa, built by Chevrolet, may have been one of the most controversial American cars of the 1960s. But controversy and interesting cars have always had a habit of finding each other. Introduced as the performance-oriented version of the Corvair lineup, the Corsa featured Chevrolet's unusual rear-mounted air-cooled flat-six engine. Buyers could choose multiple configurations, including a turbocharged version producing up to 180 horsepower, serious performance for the era. Now in the mid-1960s, a rear-engine American car already felt unconventional. Most Detroit manufacturers preferred putting large V8s up front and calling it a day. But Chevrolet tried something different. The Corvair later became the center of major safety debates after Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed, creating one of the biggest automotive controversies of the decade, because sometimes a car becomes famous for reasons nobody expected. Car number 26, the 1967 Panhard 24BT. The 1967 Panhard 24BT, built by French manufacturer Panhard, looked like a stylish little Grand Tourer from the future. After considering how unusual it was, future may actually have been the goal. Introduced in the 1960s, the 24BT became one of the final passenger cars produced by Panhard before the company moved away from automobile production. Under the hood sat a tiny air-cooled two-cylinder boxer engine, producing around 50 horsepower. Now, 50 horsepower may not sound especially exciting today, but French car makers often approached automotive design a little differently. While others chased giant V8s and tire smoke, Panhard focused on lightweight construction, efficiency, and clever engineering. The result was a car that felt remarkably advanced and aerodynamic for its time. And honestly, finding a rare French engineering experiment inside Jay Leno's garage feels less surprising the more you learn about his collection. Car number 27, the 1967 Mazda Cosmo 110S. The 1967 Mazda Cosmo 110S, built by Mazda, looked like a sleek little sports coupe, but underneath it carried technology that seemed almost too futuristic for the 1960s. Introduced in 1967, the Cosmo 110S became one of the world's first production cars powered by a twin-rotor Wankel rotary engine. While many manufacturers experimented with rotary technology, Mazda became the company most determined to make it work. The small 982cc rotary engine produced around 110 horsepower, and because rotary engines operated differently than traditional piston engines, the Cosmo delivered smooth power and loved high revs. The car also represented the beginning of Mazda's decades-long relationship with rotary technology, a journey that would eventually lead to legends like the RX-7 and RX-8, because sometimes one unusual idea ends up shaping an entire company's identity. Car number 28, the 1967 Lamborghini Miura P400. The 1967 Lamborghini Miura P400, built by Lamborghini, didn't just change the company, it changed the entire supercar world. Introduced in 1966 and continuing into 1967, the Miura P400 is widely considered by many historians to be the world's first true supercar. Under the body sat a mid-mounted 3.9-liter V12 engine, producing around 350 horsepower, a layout inspired by racing cars and something almost unheard of in road cars at the time. Now, placing the engine behind the driver may sound normal today, but in the late 1960s, this was the automotive equivalent of someone walking into a board meeting and suggesting they redesign gravity. The Miura combined breathtaking performance with styling by Marcello Gandini at Burntone, creating one of the most beautiful cars ever built. Because every once in a while, a car arrives and suddenly everyone else has to catch up. Car number 29, the 1967 Imperial Crown Coupe. The 1967 Imperial Crown Coupe, built by Imperial, Chrysler's standalone luxury division, came from a time when American luxury cars believed bigger wasn't just better, it was practically a design requirement. Introduced in 1967, the Crown Coupe represented top-tier American comfort and presence. Under the hood sat a massive 440 cubic inch V8, producing around 350 horsepower, delivering smooth power with the kind of confidence expected from a full-size luxury flagship. And full size really meant full size. This car stretched over 18 feet long, making modern SUVs suddenly seem a little less intimidating. The Imperial also featured hidden headlights and styling that leaned heavily into prestige. This wasn't a car built to rush anywhere, it was built to arrive. Car number 30, the 1967 Citroën 2CV. The 1967 Citroën 2CV, built by French manufacturer Citroën, may be one of the strangest success stories in automotive history, because while most car companies spent the 1960s chasing horsepower, chrome, and speed, Citroën seemed focused on a very different mission: build a car that could cross a plowed field while carrying eggs without breaking them. Yes, that was reportedly part of the original design brief. Introduced years earlier and still rolling through 1967, the 2CV used a tiny air-cooled two-cylinder engine, producing roughly 21 horsepower. And while that won't exactly pin you to the seat, speed was never really the point. The 2CV focused on simplicity, affordability, and suspension so soft it looked like the car politely bounced over roads rather than driving on them. Because sometimes changing automotive history doesn't require more power. just a completely different idea. Car number 31. The 1968 Triumph TR6. The 1968 Triumph TR6, built by British manufacturer Triumph, looked like a classic sports car should. Long hood, simple lines, 2 seats, and just enough confidence to convince you every road ahead was somehow more interesting. Introduced in 1968, the TR6 replaced the older TR series styling with a cleaner, more aggressive design updated by German coach builder Karmann. Under the hood sat a 2.5-liter inline-6 engine, producing around 150 horsepower in many markets and giving the lightweight roadster respectable performance for its time. The TR6 quickly became one of Triumph's most successful sports cars, especially in North America, when drivers loved its combination of affordability and open-top fun. Of course, being a British sports car from the 1960s also meant reliability occasionally became more of a suggestion than a guarantee, because sometimes a little personality comes with a few surprises, included at no extra charge. Car number 32. The 1968 Pontiac Firebird Sprint. The 1968 Pontiac Firebird Sprint, built by Pontiac, proved that muscle car attitude didn't always require a giant V8 under the hood. Sometimes the interesting option wasn't the loudest one on the dealership floor. Introduced as part of the first-generation Firebird lineup, the Sprint package came equipped with Pontiac's unusual overhead cam inline-6 engine. In its high-output version, the 230 cubic inch 6-cylinder produced up to 215 horsepower, impressive numbers for an engine layout most American manufacturers largely ignored. Now, during the late 1960s, if someone walked into a Pontiac showroom asking for performance, most people expected them to leave with a V8. Instead, Pontiac engineers quietly built a lighter and more balanced alternative, and that made the Firebird Sprint something a little different. Which also explains why a car like this feels right at home inside Jay Leno's collection. Car number 33. The 1968 Ford Bronco. The 1968 Ford Bronco, built by Ford, arrived long before SUVs became luxury family vehicles with heated seats and enough screens to resemble a small electronics store. Introduced in 1966 and continuing into 1968, the early Bronco was designed as a rugged, compact off-road machine meant to compete with vehicles like the Jeep CJ and International Harvester Scout. Under the hood, buyers could choose engines including a 289 cubic inch V8, giving the little Bronco plenty of power for trails, mud, and adventures that probably seemed like good ideas at the time. Its simple-bodied design, short wheelbase, and serious off-road capability quickly earned it a loyal following. Back then, the Bronco wasn't trying to be luxurious. It was trying to survive. Looking at it today, it feels like one of those vehicles that accidentally became too cool simply by doing exactly what it was designed to do. Car number 34. The 1969 Lotus Elan. The 1969 Lotus Elan, built by British manufacturer Lotus, followed a very different philosophy than most performance cars of its era. While other companies chased giant engines and big horsepower numbers, Lotus believed speed came from keeping things light. And very light. By 1969, the Lotus Elan had already earned a reputation as one of the best handling sports cars in the world. Under the hood sat a 1.6-liter twin-cam inline-4 engine, producing around 115 horsepower depending on version. Now on paper, that might not sound especially dramatic, but the Elan weighed barely over 1,500 pounds, giving it agility that made larger sports cars feel like they were negotiating with physics instead of working with it. The Elan also became hugely influential. In fact, Mazda engineers later used it as inspiration for the MX-5 Miata. Because sometimes a car's greatest impact isn't horsepower, it's the generations of cars that quietly follow its blueprint. Car number 35. The 1969 Lamborghini Miura P400S. The 1969 Lamborghini Miura P400S, built by Lamborghini, took a car that had already shocked the automotive world and somehow made it even better. Introduced in 1969, the P400S was an updated version of the original Miura P400, the machine many enthusiasts consider the world's first true supercar. Behind the driver sat a mid-mounted 3.9-liter V12, now producing around 370 horsepower, giving the Miura performance that bordered on unbelievable for the late 1960s. The S stood for Spinto, meaning pushed or turned, and the car received upgrades including improved interior materials, power windows, and various mechanical refinements. Of course, none of that changed the main attraction, a screaming V12 sitting directly behind your head. Because some cars transport people, others make every drive feel like a scene from a movie. Car number 36. The 1969 Lamborghini Espada. The 1969 Lamborghini Espada, built by Lamborghini, answered a question almost nobody expected. What if a supercar company built something impractical enough to bring friends along? Introduced in 1968 and continuing into 1969, the Espada became one of Lamborghini's earliest attempts at a true four-seat Grand Tourer. Under its long hood sat a powerful 3.9-liter V12 engine, producing around 325 horsepower, giving the car serious performance while still offering room for more than two passengers. Now, practicality and Lamborghini don't usually appear in the same sentence very often, but somehow the Espada made it work. Its styling by legendary designer Marcello Gandini at Bertone looked futuristic even by late 1960s standards, with sharp lines and enormous glass areas that made it stand out instantly. Because every now and then, even the wildest car companies decide to surprise everyone, including themselves. Looking through Jay Leno's collection of 1960s cars feels like opening a time capsule from one of the boldest eras in automotive history. These weren't just machines built to move people from one place to another. They were experiments, statements, and sometimes wonderfully strange ideas brought to life. Some changed history, others quietly disappeared. But each one tells a story about a decade when car companies took risks, and engineers occasionally ignored the safe option entirely. And maybe that's why these cars still matter today. Because while technology moves forward, creativity and personality never really go out of style. Thanks for watching, folks. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What is your favorite 60s car? Let us know in the comments.